Hello, everyone. Happy Motivational Monday. My name is Kira. I am your host, and we have the wonderful Charles here. He'll get an introduction in just a moment. Both of us are curious. What is one word that describes how you're feeling today? Maybe you're like me, you're feeling a little bit more cozy because it was 70 degrees over the weekend, and then now it's 24 and snowy and windy. So I'm feeling cozy today. I'm curious how you all are feeling. Maybe you're feeling motivated, maybe you're feeling excited, maybe you're feeling re-energized, maybe you're like, I did not sleep well. I'm curious. So let us know in the chat how you're feeling. We here at Life Guides feed off of your energy as well. So as much as we give you, we love to get it back as well. Um, oh, Chris was just in Puerto Rico last week. So amazing. I'm very envious of you. I need a little tan on my skin. So yeah, let us know how you're feeling, how you're doing. I just dropped the song in the chat for you. That was Leon Bridges, the song Beyond. Hopefully, a lot of you know that. If you don't, then you're welcome for bringing a new song to your ears today. We have been doing our stress and anxiety month, and February is a short month, so this is our last motivational Monday for stress and anxiety before we move into women's well-being next month. At first, it was called Women's Health, and then I wanted to have it be more broad and in general for women's well-being overall. So we're probably going to talk a little bit about women in leadership, speaking your voice, having boundaries, the neuroscience of women's well-being, things along those lines as well. So I'm very excited for next month, but we still have this month to wrap up. So we have today's Motivational Monday with Charles, and then this is a big, heavy event week. The last week of every month is a big, heavy event week for us here. So we have the Motivational Monday today, and then we have the deep dive on Wednesday, which is a 60-minute deep dive into stress and anxiety with our guide, Carolyn. And she and I are going to be diving into kind of more of like the long-term things. So some of what we're talking about today and what you've heard me and the other guides talk about are like, how do you manage stress in the moment? In the deep dive, we're going to be talking about how do you create the internal environment for stress to exist on a less frequent basis? How do we change our mindset? How do we change the way we view the world? What's in our sphere of control? What's not in our sphere of control? So you'll get an email about that most likely today. But I'm going to drop that registration link in the chat for you. And then the deep dive mentorship is on Thursday. It's a 60-minute group mentorship session. So it'll be me and Carolyn, a guide. We're going to be helping you go through the sphere of control. We're going to talk about like the main things that are bringing us stress and anxiety and just give you practical tips and tools related to you and your specific story to help you start navigating all of everything along those lines. So the reason why we're talking about stress and anxiety is because it's one of our top three topics that our members schedule guide calls for. So we have our events that we do that follow those main topics, but the main topics are derived from our one-on-one guide calls that you can book with a guide. So Charles is one of our guides. He is amazing. He's someone who you can book a private call with, dive a little bit deeper. He can help you manage stress and anxiety. And he also does a lot of wonderful things as well outside of just stress and anxiety management. So I'm dropping his profile in the chat. And you'll see that his superpower is that he helps individuals combine practical discipline with their aspirations to build a successful and meaningful life. And that's in all areas of life. So, hi, Charles. Welcome to today's conversation. Can you give us a little bit of an intro for today's session?
Sure. We all have stress every day in our lives. And and then there's some stresses that are come from major events in our lives. And if you don't have the tools or the knowledge of how to deal with each aspect of them, you can turn them into something bigger than what they are. And it can just bring you to like you're stuck and you can't move, you can't think. And so we don't want you to stay in those situations for very long. It's getting some tools, trying them out, see what works for you, what doesn't work for you to get you in and out of different types of stress situations so you can keep moving forward with life.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And I feel like a lot of us can relate to sometimes clenching on to just like life's experience, drop 111 in the chat if you are kind of that person or if you've experienced that in your life. And while they're dropping that in the chat, quickly, since all of us are in the cold and you're in the sunshine, tell us where you are so we can envy you for a moment.
Sure. I'm in Bacalar, Mexico, which is in the Yucatan right now. And it's probably about 85 degrees. I'm 3 blocks away from the water, and I'm just getting suntan like crazy.
Beautiful. So if there's anyone's life who I'm trying to emanate or take the energy of today, it is Charles's life. So hopefully all your energy will give us all of that sunshine. And I know Chris goes, I'm not mad, I'm jealous. I agree. So with that, now that we all envy you, can you tell us a little bit about your own personal experience with stress and anxiety before we dive deeper into today's topic?
Sure. So I've gone through many different situations. The first one and the biggest one that taught me how to deal with stress was the military. So when you go into the military, they're always screaming at you, loud noise are going on, and they're requiring you to continue to think and process and get things done. They call it the fog of war. So they're trying to create a war type of environment mentality where you can process it, keep functioning when everything is going wrong. And so those were some great tools that I've learned. And at first, it was just overwhelming because the brain wants to shut down. You're like, too much, too much, too much. You can't handle it. So then you have different situations. You losing a business or health. Um, Something happens to your child. So these are different types of stress situations. And each one of them are different categories of types of stress or how to deal with my perception on the situation and learning tools to help me take me back and come to realization of what's in my control and what's not are two different things.
Absolutely. And like I said, we'll be talking about the whole sphere of control um in our deep dive. So if that interests you and you're like, "Ooh, what does that mean?" I would suggest joining us. The link is up in the chat for you to join. But I think it's really relevant, Charles, a lot of what you said. I think life can be stressful overall in general. We go through a lot of situations, anxiety comes up. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about before we hear the stories that you help people with, Charles, is there is a difference between stress and anxiety, and I want you all to be able to differentiate it and kind of know some of the common topics that accentuate this stress and anxiety that we feel within ourselves. Stress is typically caused by external factors, so things like financial problems, work and employment, personal relationships, health concerns, major life changes, mental health, and lack of control and uncertainty. I'm actually dropping those in the chat for you so that you can have them and maybe ponder them. If there's any of those where you're like, oh, that's the one that I deal with the most, please drop it in the chat and let us know. But also, anxiety is caused by internal factors mostly. So there's perfectionism that causes anxiety. Stressful life events and trauma, if exacerbated for a long amount of time, can cause anxiety, or just a big event in general can make us anxious. Childhood trauma, social isolation. I work from home. If I am isolated and alone for too long, I will notice that my mental state starts depleting significantly. Physical or mental health problems, social and societal pressures, those are all some of the top topics that lead to anxiety. Um, Obviously, everyone's experience is different. You may have different things that lead to your anxiety or that have caused some stresses in your life. But if we start to categorize this, these are some of the top topics that we see. And the thing with all of this and why I share this is one, so that we can understand the difference. Brene Brown, I believe she's the one who says this, if you can't name it, then you shame it. So if we feel these intense feelings, but we don't know how to name them and work through them, then we feel a lot of shame. We also feel a lot of shame when we feel alone in the situation as well. So that's also why I share it to say like you're not alone, you're not the only one. 20% of people experience anxiety symptoms on a daily basis. 40% of people experience daily stress as well. So it's pretty normalized, and you can drop 222 in the chat if you experience either of those on kind of a regular basis. You're like, oh, yeah, I'm there with you. You're not alone. And I do too. I'll drop a 222 in the chat as well. So, Charles, we know a little bit about stress and anxiety. We know some of your personal experience, and we also know that you're a life guide. So I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit more about what are those common stories that you hear from your members regarding their stress and anxiety.
So it varies. So we have things like stress and anxiety that comes from maybe like a child loss, which is different than someone who has stress and anxiety about work. And so there's two different ways depending on what kind of stress and anxiety is where it's triggered from. So the best example is that I give people is my own child. She was stressing out over school, but the stress was legitimate stress at her age. But because she's trying to learn something new and to acquire knowledge, but she's performing and she's doing everything she needs to do, I have to let her sit in that stress. I can't pull her out and say, breathe, because sometimes when you're in the mud, you got to stay in the mud to complete what you're doing. So this is where like there's like these different types of stress, and depending on where you're at uh, and what kind of stress it is, doesn't mean that I should pull you out. And maybe I need to give you some techniques to deal with new situations. So as things rise, you have little tools that keep you on track without drag you down into the mud. And then there's these harsher conditions of life that require a little bit more delicacy, a little bit more techniques on dealing with the situation to relieve the anxiety, the stress over the situation.
So we're going to be talking about some of those, which I'm very excited. When Charles and I were planning this conversation, I was like, how do you help people move through their stress and anxiety? And some of the really great examples he gave, we're going to be talking about today. So, Charles, we talked a lot leading up to this conversation. I would love to know a little bit more of the mindfulness practices that you help people with, because once I talked to you and once I started doing some studying for today's conversation, I saw that mindfulness, it's really cool. Mindfulness practices are just as beneficial as medications for stress and anxiety. Now, obviously, mindfulness practices that takes a long amount of time to be able to generate that same amount of effect. It doesn't happen, well, it does happen immediately, but it takes time as well. So that's one of the common differences between those is the medication is immediate. And we talked to one of our other guides in the beginning of February who said, if you need to take medication, it's okay. If you need to feel good, it's okay. So we're giving you lots of different types of tools so that you can find what works best for you, or maybe take a few of them and be like, okay, what works best for me? So what are some of those practices, Charles? Can you walk us through a couple of them for helping your
Sure.
members move through their stress and anxiety?
Stress. Um, let's start with the simplest one first, which is just finding your pulse. So if I take my wrist and I bring my thumb down and just kind of move it around a little bit until you find your pulse. And Kira, I'll key on you when you find it. Just give me a thumbs up.
I, okay, so I'm pressing hard enough that I feel it. I feel it now.
Okay. So I want you just to close your eyes and just take a deep, slow breath. So it should just be very relaxing. And just focus in on feeling your heartbeat. And we're just going to keep taking those deep, slow breath and continue feeling that heartbeat. And it should be just very gentle and relaxing and soothing. And then when you're done, just open up your eyes gently and come back. So, Kier, for you, what's your feeling of just kind of meditating a little bit just on your own heartbeat?
It helped me feel present. And I feel like it also gave me the perspective of I'm alive. And I feel like sometimes our stress and anxiety, we forget how simple it is over the fact that like it's a gift that we're alive and that we can be stressed in this lifetime. So that's what it gave to me is that remembrance of oh, I'm here, I'm present, I get to live this life.
Yeah, I always tell people we forget that we're alive, we're love, and sometimes we need to feel our own selves to realize that, hey, everything's okay. There's something about the heartbeat when you touch, when you're listening to your own heartbeat, that it's very soothing for people and very relaxing. So I always tell people try to use the tools that are right there on your own body. And sometimes it'll bring great comfort to you.
Mm.
Okay. So the second meditation or mindfulness technique that I tell people is um, if everyone will join in, just gently close your eyes and start taking a slow, deep breath and just gently breathe in and out very slowly with a deep breath. I want you to feel that your legs are getting heavy but very light. And from your legs, as they're getting heavy and very light, that feeling and sensation is going to move up through the body. And just keep breathing in and out slowly but very deeply, and allowing the body to get heavier but very light and relaxed. And as we come up to the head and the body is very relaxed and heavy, I want you to start seeing yourself in your mind standing there. And as you're taking those deep, slow breaths, your body's staying very heavy and relaxed. I want you to walk towards yourself and I want you to turn around and hug yourself. And as you're hugging yourself, I want you to say, whisper in your ear, I love you. You are beautiful. And when you're done, just gently open your eyes and relax.
Hmm.
Kira, how was that one for you?
That one's one of my favorites. I've done a similar practice, if any of you are familiar with parts work, where there's like the science of how trauma and just life fragments you, and there are pieces of you that try to protect you and save you from the same harmful situations. I've worked with a little Kira, and I've had to tell her, especially during stressful times or in relationships or when my attachment issues start showing up. I'm like, girl, I got you. It's okay. Give her a hug, tell her she's good. So that one is when I'm really in it. That's one of the ones that is the most beneficial and has had like the most long-term effects for me. So I love that you brought that into today's conversation.
Session. And we forgot to talk about one, but I think this one is important for people. Just to explain, it's not something I can do here. If you have children, and especially when they come home and they're sad, they've had a rough day, they've been bullied, whatever, the best thing you can give them is the biggest hug. Whatever you're doing, just stop, hug them like a bear hug, very hard for 3 solid deep breaths. And while you're doing those 3 solid deep breaths, do not think of anything else but the person who you're hugging, because of the best way to get rid of that stress is by giving someone kind of like taking the weight off of their shoulders for a moment so that they can just get a break. And you're not fixing the situation, you're just giving someone a break so that they can breathe and then you're letting them go. And something just changes in people dramatically. I do that with my kids all the time. And when your kids are stressed out and stuff, like my kids are older now, so they'll like then they're like little, dolls, they just putty. And so it's worked for me. A lot of old meditation teachers will talk about the importance of that. My grandparents were like that to me when I was a kid. So I always tell people that's another wonderful tool for most children, younger people, because they need it. And it's not about like sometimes spending money on them. It's sometimes just giving them that emotional support.
So beautiful. I think that emotional intelligence as a parent is one of the most valuable skills that we can develop. So thank you for bringing that into the conversation. And I think that leads into some of the additional practices that you and I wanted to talk about before our session comes to an end. And before we dive into those, drop 333 in the chat for those of you who are listening. If you tuned into those mindfulness practices with us, drop 333 in the chat if that was beneficial to you. Because and it's every motivational Monday we're doing some sort of breathing exercise or meditation in this month because we have to develop a habit, right? And I just did a session with one of our other organizations that we partner with specifically on habits. And one of the cues that triggers you to do a new habit is an emotion, right? So if you're feeling the emotion of stress and anxiety, that can be the cue that triggers the routine of, oh, I can breathe. I can feel my heartbeat. I can remember I'm right here. So I'm so happy to see in the chat that so many of you found benefit of that. And Charles, I know you and I talked a little bit more about like some practices that we can just do in our daily lives that
Yes.
will help us relieve stress and anxiety and live more of a meaningful life. Do you mind giving us some of those tips and tricks before we close out today's conversation?
Sure. So the first thing I always tell people, get out of your own mind. Sometimes we know what we have to do, but in the process of doing it, we will just overthink things and complicate it and create stress or more stress where we don't need to. So it's kind of like if you know how to run, why do you need to think about running? Just go run. There's things that we do every day. We know how to open up the door without thinking. No one tells us when to go to the bathroom. We just automatically know. So we don't have to think about daily things. And sometimes we overthink things and we make things more complicated than what they are. So just remember, you don't always need your mind to be working. Sometimes it can cause you problems as much as it can fix problems. So knowing the balance, sometimes you just need to turn off the mind. The next big trick I tell everyone is when you come home from work, your home is your sanctuary. And it should be your kids' sanctuary. It should be, if you have other people in the house, it should be their sanctuary. You should leave all your problems at the door. So, um, how I explain this, imagine that you have a trunk sitting at your front door with a key. You unlock that trunk, you put all the garbage in there, you lock it up, then you go inside. And if I have to discuss something that's important, that's a little bit more derogatory, I always, with my wife, we would always step outside. We trying to keep the house with good energy is so valuable. And I cannot mention that enough. The second thing I've learned that has kept my marriage together is we do not settle arguments on the couch. In other words, arguments get finished and completed before we go to bed. So we're both going to the same bed. We're not separating the bed. Um, everyone has arguments in relationships, and the whole world seems like it's going to collapse in. But there is always a solution and a compromise to every situation. And the point is to get yourself relaxed and calm down. So I always tell people if it gets too heated, take a break, come back, then deal with it because the rational minds deal with things better. But no one should be sleeping on the couch at the end of the day. And that will keep that keeps things from prolonging, going on days later. It needs, it started today, it needs to be finished today.
So beautiful. And I think this is such a good reminder too, because I think that we think of stress and anxiety as mostly like our own individual experiences, but relationships do cause a lot of stress and anxiety. And I think it's our responsibility for the people that we love to choose to show up in good ways and to create healthy habits to support those relationships. So thank you so much for giving us such great, useful tips and tricks. Even with me working at home, I think like once I'm done for the workday, I'm gonna open up my door and just literally step outside of my house, put everything, all of the stresses outside of my house, and then come back in and be like, honey, I'm home. It's just me and my dogs. Honey, I'm home, and like start a new day, like leave it all at the door. So I think that's so practical and so real. And we have just a couple more minutes. I know the last thing that I wanted us to talk about very, very quickly is you and I had that conversation of not all stress is bad. And I feel like ending the session with your perspective on that will be very valuable for everyone here.
Sure. Sometimes when we're learning something new, we are stressed. Oh my God, I have a test or I got to learn this new language. It's overwhelming in the beginning. But that stress is real. It's good. It, what it's telling you is I got to do something that I'm unfamiliar with. So it's making you very aware of that, but it's requiring you and you know that you're going to have to do it. So that's a good stress. It's like I was talking about my daughter. She's in the heat of the moment. She's doing everything she needs to do. It's the stress of doing that work, but I can't pull her out because if I pull her out, then she's going to get relaxed and she's not going to continue on doing what she's been doing. And so this is where I go. There is good stress and identifying what's good stress. So if you're starting a new job, that's good stress. I want you to have that stress. You're going for a test at school. I want you to have that. You're buying a house for the first time. I want you to have that stress. You're doing your first investment. I want you to have that stress. So these are good stresses because you're doing something productive in your life and you're not sure of the end results and you don't know how things work in the beginning. And that's fine. So that means that you're learning something. And I want you to be stressed in those situations.
Such a good perspective. Thank you so much for all of your advice on today's session. I feel like it's was really relatable, really grounded, and also just very easy practical tips for us all to remember as we're navigating all of the circumstances of life. So I just dropped a bunch of links in the chat for you all. Reminder, we have the deep dive on Wednesday. We're going to be diving into more of like the long-term ways to handle stress and anxiety. So changing your perspective, changing your mindset, giving you like the actual facts on how to develop a mind that is resilient instead of reactive. Thursday is the deep dive mentorship. So that's where we take everything that we've learned all month and we bring it all into practicality. We've got a little workshop that we're going to be doing around the sphere of control. And then we're also going to be helping you navigate your own struggles with stress and anxiety and just hearing your stories. You'll also see that Charles's profile is in the chat as well. So if you've loved today's conversation and you're like, wow, I could really benefit from talking to this human and getting some support from him, then his profile is right there. Your organization or the company that you either work for, go to school with, have partnered with Life Guide. So you have this access for free. And the last thing that you'll see that I don't talk about often is our Life Guides Learning Hub. So right on our Life Guides website, you'll see on the top right, Learning Hub. We've got worksheets and resources and our calendar of events and just everything there for you. So if you're looking for more of like a self-paced journey, if you're looking for like new places to start your growth, that is a great place to go. So we hope that you all find more peace and ease in your lives, a little bit of respite from your stress and anxiety, or maybe the realization that some of your stress is actually good and is getting you to where you want to go. So thank you all so much for being here. There's a survey that pops up at the end. We would love your feedback. We hope you have a great week and we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.